Okay, good morning, everyone. We are on Kuf Chaf Aleph. We'll begin on the bottom of Kuf Chaf Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Ula Beit Shammai dilas lahu gezerat shava, and according to Beit Shammai, who don't have the gezerat shava that we said yesterday of zehadavar from shchut echut to nadarim, and therefore they have no way to know that three regular people, three hadyotos, will be able to go ahead and be matir a neder. Hafaras Nadarim, which again we said is Hataras Nadarim for all intents and purposes. Bishlosha Diotas Minalu. How do we know that? Nafkal Humi Ditanya. So they learn it from a brisa that says, Vayidaber Moshe es Moadei Hashem b'nei Yisrael. And Moshe declared the Moadim of Hashem to b'nei Yisrael. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Moadei Hashem Nemru, Shabbos Breishis lo Nemra. Ben Azai Omer, Moadei Hashem Nemru, Hafaras Nadarim lo Nemra. So let's go ahead and let's see what this brisa is talking about. Rabbi Yossi bar Nasan Gomer Lalaha Matznisa. Rabbi Yossi bar Nasan learned this brisa. V'lo yada leile frusha. He didn't know what it meant. Azal Basra Rav Sheishes l'Naharda. He went to find Rav Sheishes in Naharda. V'lo Ashkecha. He couldn't find him. Azal Basra l'Mechuzah. He went to follow Rav Sheishes to Mechuzah. Ashkecha. He found him and he asked him, Amar Lai, my Moadei Hashem Nemru Shabbos Breishis lo Nemra. What is this brisa? The beginning of the brisa that says that Moadei Hashem was Nemru, but Shabbos Breishis was lo Nemra. Amar Lai, Moadei Hashem tzrichin kiddush bezdin. Shabbos Breishis ain't a tzricha kiddush bezdin. What it means is that Moadei Hashem, the festivals need to have Kiddush Bezdin. They need to be proclaimed by Bezdin because Bezdin needs to proclaim each and every month based on the testimony of witnesses. But Shabbos Breishis, the weekly Shabbos, every single Saturday, every single Shabbos, that doesn't have to be proclaimed. It's sanctified automatically from the time of creation. Why would you think otherwise? Because the verse, the chapter, the pasuk by Shabbos is written next to the Moados, next to the festivals. Tiboy Kiddush Bezdin Kamados. So you might think just like the Moados need to have Kiddush Bezdin in order to have Rosh Chodesh, and in order to have the Moados, so Shabbos Breishis or Shabbos every single Saturday we need to be Mekadesh. Bezdin needs to be Mekadesh as well in order for us to have every single Shabbos. Kamash Malan. That's not the case. That's the first part of the brisa. What's the second part of the brisa? What does it mean? Moadei Hashem Nemru Hafaras Nadarim lo Nemra. Moadei Hashem Tzrichin Mumchin Hafaras Nadarim Eina Tzricha Mumchin. So it means that the Moadei Hashem need not only to have judges, but they need to have three expert judges to sanctify the month. Hafaras Nadarim doesn't need Mumchin, but we learn from here that even though they don't need Mumchin, three regular people, three hadyosos, three laymen would suffice to be able to go ahead and to be matir and neder. Says the Gemara, but by nedarim it says v'harashe hamatos ksiv. It seems to be the head of the tribes. Says the Gemara, Am Rav Chisda, Am Rabbi Yochanan biyachid mumche. So it comes out that for hataras nedarim you could either have a yachid mumche, you could have one single expert, or you could have three hadyotos. But by kiddush hachodesh you need to have three experts, three mumchen. Says the Gemara, it's not Hasam. Amar b'Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo hayu yamim tovim liYisrael kechamisha asar ba'av uchiyom HaKippurim. There were no days that were as happy for the Jewish people as Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. Why? Shebahen benos Yerushalayim yotzos b'klei lavan shul. And what happened on those days? The girls of Yerushalayim, the single girls, would go out in their white garments that they had borrowed. Shalolevaish and Misha Ein Lo. They borrowed garments from each other so that if somebody couldn't afford it, they wouldn't be embarrassed. So they go out and they would find the men. They would be dressed beautifully in their white garments, and they would make shidduchim on those days. So why Yom Kippur and why Tu B'Av? Says the Gemara, Bishlam Yom HaKippurim Yom Slichu Mechila. I understand why they would do that on Yom Kippur. It's a very happy day because it's a day that we were forgiven, and we continue to be forgiven in each and every generation. Where were we originally forgiven on Yom Kippur? Yom Shenitnu Bo Luchos Achronos. It was the day that the second Luchos were given to show that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had forgiven the Jewish people from the Chet HaEgel, and therefore we're going to say that Yom Kippur is a day of celebration from that day and for eternity, and therefore it makes sense that the girls would go out and they would dance on that day and look for shidduchim. Chamisha Asar B'Av Mahi. What's going on Tu B'Av? Why is Tu B'Av such a happy day? So the Gemara is going to give 6 answers, I believe. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Yom Shehudu Shvatim Lavo Zeh B'Zeh. It was the day that he learns from Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It's a day that he has a Kabbalah tradition that was the day that the Shvatim could go Zeh B'Zeh. My drush, what's the drush? Like we said yesterday, Zeh Davar Ze Lo Yehi Noah Gela B'Dor Zeh. It's only in that generation. We said V'chol Bas that every single girl who inherited, so every single girl from that first generation who went into Eretz Yisrael, they needed to marry somebody in their family so that the land would not go out of the Shevet. When I say family, I mean Shevet. And therefore, every single girl needs to marry somebody Shevet, except for who? Except for Beno Salavchad. But there was a tradition that on the 15th of Av, after that generation had gone ahead and died out, at least most of them had died out, starting from the 15th of Av of whatever year that was, a few years after they had gone in, or many years after they had gone to the land of Israel, from the 15th of Av of that year, they no longer had to marry into their own Shevet, and the daughters of a certain Shevet can marry out of the Shevet. The Rashbam does point out that if there were any woman still alive from that generation of the original Gzeira at the time that they switched it over, they still had to marry, if they were getting married at that point, they still had to marry into their Shevet. But the girls from the next generation could marry out of their Shevet. That was the first thing about Tu B'Av. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan says, Yom Shehuter Shevet Binyamin Lavo Bakal. We know that at the case of the Pelegish Begiva, so Shevet Binyamin had been wiped out except for 600 men. And those 600 men couldn't marry anybody. Why? Because it says, Ish Yisrael Nishba Ba Mitzpah Lemor. The Israelites, the Jewish people, took a swear at Mitzpah, shvur at Mitzpah, saying, Ish Mimenu, Lo Yitain Bito Le Binyamin Lisha. We're not going to give any of our daughters to Binyamin. So now there's a problem. You have 600 Binyaminite men, and they have nobody to marry. So what happened on Tu B'Av? Says the Gemara, my Drush, what happened? Mimenu v'lo mi banenu. So on Tu B'Av, it was decided that what? It was decided that it was mimenu v'lo mi banenu, that this shvua was only for this generation. And on Tu B'Av, what happened was the last of these people from this generation of a particular year, again, an undetermined year, but it was on the 15th of Av of a certain year that they decided that the Jewish people did a count and realized that all of the generation of those who had taken this oath had already died, and therefore, since it was only mimenu from among us who cannot marry, or our daughters cannot marry the tribe of Binyamin, but mi banenu, but our children's kids, so our granddaughters can marry. So from the 15th of Av is when they decided in a particular year that all of that generation had died, and therefore any daughters can now go ahead and marry into these 600 men, which again are the granddaughters, not the daughters, but the granddaughters of those who had taken this Shavua. Rav Dimi, a third reason why Tu B'Av is such a happy day, is Bar Yosef Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Dimi says in the name of Rav Nachman, Yom Shekalu Bo Meisei Midbar. It's the day on which those who were destined to die in the Midbar cease to die. To Amar Mar Chelo Kalu Meisei Midbar, because as Mar says that until the Meisei Midbar died, Lo Haya Dibor in Moshe, because Baruch didn't speak to Moshe during those 40 years. Because it says that when all of the men had died, and then it says in the very next pasuk with Samech Levi, Daber Hashem Elai Lemor, Elai Hayad Dibor. And Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't speak to me from the time that the Jewish people started dying after the Cheta Egel, that the men started dying. He didn't come to me directly in the same type of nevuah as he did before until they had all died. And as the Rashbam explains what happened, well, every single year on Erev Tisha B'Av, the men would lay down, all the men over 20, because again, as we'll see in the Pasuk just says that anybody over 20 will not go into the land of Israel. So the men over 20 would go and they would lay down, and in the morning, on Tisha B'Av, they would count, and there would be about 15,000 plus people that had died. And they did this every year during those 40 years. In the 40th year, they laid down an Erev Tisha B'Av, and on Tisha B'Av, they woke up and nobody had died. So they thought that they had miscalculated and made a mistake in the date, so they kept going in every single day until the 15th of Av. On the 15th of Av, they finally realized that everybody had died, and then nobody was going to die this year. What happened on the 15th of Av? Well, what happens on the 15th of the month? When you look up, you see the new moon, or the full moon, I should say. So when they saw the full moon on the 15th of Av, they realized that all the people had died in the previous years, and that anybody that was still alive in this 40th year actually would not die in the Midbar and would go into Eretz Yisrael. Ula Amar, he gives a fifth reason or a fourth reason for the 15th day of Av being such a festive day. Yom Shabita bo Hoshea ben Ela Pardasos, Shehoshev Yeravam ala Drachim, Yeravam ben Nevat had put up these blocks, had put up these blockades, he had put up different things on the roads so that Shelo Yalu Yisrael L'Regel, that they couldn't go up to the Aliyah L'Regel, the Jewish people. He had put up, as the Rashbam says, Shomrim. And Hoshea ben Ela got rid of these Shomrim, he got rid of these things that were preventing the Jewish people from doing Aliyah L'Regel, and the day that he got rid of them was Tu B'Av, and seemingly they were able to go up Aliyah L'Regel for the following Sukkos. A fifth reason, Rav Masna Amar, Yom Sheninu Aruge Beisar L'Kvur, was the day that the slain Jews of Beitar were given a burial. The Amar Rav Masna, Oso Hayom Sheninu Haruge Beisar Lekvura. On that very day, Tubav, Tiknu Biyavna Hatov Ametiv. That was the fourth bracha of Birchas Hamazon. Tov Ametiv was because of Yavna. What was the Tov that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did, and what was the Metiv that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did? Hatov Shelo Hisrichu. The Tov was that these bodies did not decay. V'Hametiv Shenitnu Lekvura. Even though they had sat out, they did not decay. And the Metiv is that they ultimately were given a burial. The sixth reason, Rabbi Rav Yosef to Amri Tarvayu, Yom Sheposkin Bo Milichros Eitzim Lamaracha. What happened on the 15th of Av? It was the day that they stopped chopping down the wood in order to use on the Mizbeach. Tanya, as it says in a brayse, Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer Kevan Sheibia Chamisha Asar Ba'av Tashash Kocha Shel Chama V'lo Hayu Korsin Eitzim Lamaracha. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 15th of Av. That's the real summer months. That's when the sun, even though it's hard to believe in Toronto at this point, but the sun is really, really strong and beating out, and the days are as long as they get. That's when they would cut the wood because they didn't want the wood to be wet. Why didn't they want the wood to be wet? As the Rashbam says, they didn't want the wood to be wet, A, because they didn't want it to be wormy, the wood that they're going to use on the Mizbeach, and if it's wet, it gets wormy. And second of all, if it's wet, so then there's a lot of smoke, and they didn't want a lot of smoke coming up from the Mizbeach. So on the 15th of Av is when the tides turn, and it's when the sun is not as strong, and therefore they would stop on the 15th of Av from cutting wood because the sun was no longer as strong and they couldn't dry it as well. And since the Rashbam says that was the last day that they cut the wood, that was the day when they celebrated because it was the end of the mitzvah of getting wood for the Maracha. Says the Gemara, Amar of Menasha, V'karule Yom Tvar Magal. They called it the day of the breaking of the axe because it was the day that they no longer needed their axes to chop down the wood. Mikan ve'elach, the Gemara says parenthetically, Demotziv Yosef. From then on, from the 15th of Av, when I said that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer, somebody who adds Torah to their nighttime, Yosef, will have a long life. Because again, as the days get shorter, we learn more Torah seemingly during the days. It's easier, especially back then when there was no electricity. So he's saying that if the days get shorter, it doesn't mean that your Torah learning should get shorter. It means that your Torah learning at night should get longer, even though it might be a little bit more difficult. And if so, then Yosef, you'll have more years in your life. She'ena Mosif, if you do not add nighttime hours to your study, when the days get shorter. Yosef, my Yosef, what does Yosef mean? Tani Reb Yosef, Tikbere Ime. Rachmana Litzam, your mother will bury you because you will have a shortened life. Tana Rabbanan, Shiva Kiplu at Kola Olam Kula. There were 7 people who span the entire history. That means that they could get first-hand accounts from the previous generation all the way back to Adam. Mitushalach Ra Adam, Shem Ra Mitushalach, Yaakov Ra es Shem, Amram Ra es Yaakov, Achi Hashiloni Ra es Amram, Eliyahu Ra es Achi Hashiloni, Vadayin Kayim, and Eliyahu is still alive, and therefore all the way back from Eliyahu to Adam you can go, and there are 7 righteous people. Mitushalach, Adam, Shem, Yaakov, Amram, Achia, and Eliyahu. V'Achia Shiloni Ra es Amram. How could Achia Shiloni so Amram? That means that Achia Shiloni was in Egypt, and we know that Achia Shiloni was also in Eretz Yisrael. V'Haksiv, and it says, V'lo nosam mehem Ishkim Kalev ben Yefuna v'Yoshua ben Nun. Only Kalev ben Yefuna and Yoshua ben Nun, only they were in Egypt, and also able to go into Eretz Yisrael. So how could it be that Achia Shiloni was in Egypt and also in Eretz Yisrael? Amar from Nun lo nigzer gzeir al shifto shel Levi. That's not true. It wasn't just Yoshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna. It was other people as well. It was people from the tribe of Levi. They were also able to go into the land of Israel even though they were in Egypt. Why? Because the decree was that 20 years and older would not go into the land of Israel. But what does it say there? It doesn't just say that you're not going to be able to go into the land of Israel. It says that it will be all of your numbers in your countings. Misha pekuda mi ben esrim. This decree was only to the people who were counted from 20 and up. Yatsa shivtos alevi shebekuda mi ben shloshim. You know that when they were counted for their service, it was 30 and up. Only people who were counted from 20 and up were in the decree of not going into Eretz Yisrael if you were 20 and up at the time. But people who are counted from 30 were not part of this decree. Says the Gemara, but that's a problem because there are people that weren't from the tribe of Levi who also went into Eretz Yisrael. Yari ben Menasha, Macher ben Menasha, amongst others, Noldu b'mei Yaakov, they were in Mitzrayim, below Meisrat shenichnasu Yisrael la'aretz, and they didn't die until they went into Eretz Yisrael. Shenemar, because it says, Vayakol mehem anshe hai, that the anshe hai hit Kishloshim Veshishish. They hit 36 men. Vitanya, and we know Shloshim Veshisha Mamish de Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda says it means that they killed 36 men. But Amarlo Rabbi Nechemia, but Rabbi Nechemia said no, it doesn't say Shloshim Veshisha Vechinemar Shloshim Veshisha Halolo Nemar Ela Kishloshim Veshisha. It says that they killed approximately 36 men. What does it mean? Kishloshim doesn't mean approximately. It says Ela Zayar ben Menasha. This is talking about Yar ben Menasha, who was Kishloshim, who was like 36, who was equal to 36. What do you mean he's equal to 36? Sheshakol Keruba Sanhedrin. He was so great that he was equal to more than half of the Sanhedrin. How much was the Sanhedrin? 71. What's half? 35 and a half. What's more than half? 36. So he was equal to 36, and it means that he was killed in Eretz Yisrael. If he was killed in Eretz Yisrael, how is it possible that he was in Egypt to be able to go ahead and talk to Amram, who definitely did not make it into Eretz Yisrael, did not make it out of Egypt? There's another part. It's not just that people over 20 died, but it was only people over 20. It was only between 20 and 60. Under 20 and over 60 didn't die. And therefore, we could say that Achia Shiloni was actually 61 or more. Therefore, he was not in the Gezerah. If he wasn't in the Gezerah, then he was able to go from Mitzrayim into Eretz Yisrael and didn't have to die in the Midbar. We know that it's less than 20 because it says that only 20 and up died. However, where do we know that? It doesn't say that 20 to 60, it just says over 20. Well, we know that not more than 60, that if you were 60 or more, or more than 60, you were not included in the Gezerah. Why? Gamar v'mala me'archin. By erchin, when you give a vow to give the equivalent value of your erech, so what is it? Malahalan yaser mi ben shishim kipachos mi ben chaf. Just like over 60 is like less than 20, it's the same amount. Afkan yaser ben shishim kipachos mi ben isim. We know clearly that over 20 is going to get killed. But we also know that under 20 is not going to get killed. And since we know from Erchin that over 60 is the equivalent of under 20, so we'll say just like under 20 is not going to get killed, over 60 is not going to get killed either. And again, Achia Shiloni was over 60, and therefore he was able to survive, go from Egypt through the Midbar into Eretz Yisrael, and he was able to go ahead and pass on this tradition of man to man. Ibayilahu. Eretz Yisrael Shvatim Iflog. We're just going to ask the question and we'll do the answer tomorrow. Ibarlu Eretz Yisrael Shvatim Iflog. The land of Israel was divided according to the Shvatim, which means that each tribe got 1/12 of the land, and no matter how many people you had, you then split it up amongst those people, and therefore the smaller tribes, each person would get a bigger portion, and the bigger tribes, each person would get a larger portion. Odilma lekarkaf gavri iflog, or the land was divided according to the heads of man. It was divided according to approximately the 600,000 men who went into the land of Israel, and therefore it didn't matter how many people were in your tribe. Everybody got this equal portion of the land divided by 600,000, and if there were more men in one particular tribe, then that tribe ended up with more parts of the land of Eretz Yisrael than another tribe. Have a wonderful day.